Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How you doing?
I'm good. It's been a good week. Got a chance to go to an APL match on Tuesday, and I don't know, it's just been sort of, again, not status quo week, just everything kind of humming along okay. How about you? How's everything going over at your place?
Pretty hectic at my place. We're going to Saskatchewan this weekend. It's my grandmother's 90th birthday, so bit of a daunting road trip with a newborn and a toddler. We start packing tomorrow, and I think we're going to be devoting a lot of the day to packing because our packing list is quite extensive. By the time we leave, it's going to look like we're going to Europe for a month, I think, but it's just a 3-day trip, so we'll see.
That's the whole thing. It's all about the gear more than anything else. A lot of gear.
Yeah, it's a lot of driving for what's going to be an afternoon of visiting, but I haven't been back to Saskatchewan to see my extended family there, and probably since pre-COVID. So I am looking forward to seeing some of my aunts and uncles and my cousins who were still out there. But yeah, it's going to be quite the journey to get there, I think, and to get home afterward.
All right. Well, if you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So as the name suggests, we talk about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, post-secondary, and professional levels. We discuss the teams and players from the city's soccer community, whether that's grassroots and amateur leagues, all the way up to the university, collegiate, and professional teams, those being Cavalry FC and the Calgary Wild.
And our topics this week will be previews of the two pro teams. They're both playing on Sunday afternoon. Cavalry is playing Pacific and the Wild is playing Halifax. We'll also talk about the Alberta Premier League. There were some matches on Tuesday. We'll go over them. And we'll talk about matches coming up this week on Friday. And we're going to talk about field conditions in Calgary, about natural grass fields and being in rough shape. It's a story that you were talking about in your day job, Scott. And we have an interview this week. Who's our interview with, Scott?
Yeah, our interview was with the Calgary Wild's new majority owner, Alyssa Mitchell, who was announced in a press release just last week as a new co-owner of the club. So we talked to her about her background, which is she's an entrepreneur. She owns a clothing brand. And we talked to her about that and as well as what inspired her to invest in a professional soccer club in Calgary.
As far as I'm aware, Scott, we are the first people to interview her in context with the purchase of the soccer team. I don't think there's been any other specific media out there. So I think this is really supporters' first opportunity to hear from her. So I hope they enjoy the interview. I will run that in a little bit.
Yeah, I know she was quoted in the news release last week, but I think you're right. We're definitely the first outlet to actually talk to her about her investment. So looking forward to running that interview. But before we do that, Jason, I figured we could kick things off with conversation about the Wild's upcoming game against Halifax this weekend.
This is Alyssa Mitchell, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Calgary Wild will be playing at McWoman Stadium on Sunday afternoon, 5 p.m., and they'll be playing the fourth place Halifax Tides.
Yeah, a team that they had a decent amount of success against in their inaugural 2025 season. Looking at the form table right now, Halifax are in fourth. Calgary is at the bottom of the league standings in sixth. Halifax, however, just lost to Vancouver Rise, who were in last up until recently. So they're coming into this one following a 2-1 defeat. But I kind of look at this one, Jason, as a battle between the two bottom dwellers, or two of the bottom dwellers in the NSL, the two teams that didn't make the playoffs last year. But as mentioned, a team that the Wild earned multiple wins against last year. I think maybe the only team that they earned multiple wins against in 2025.
Yeah, Halifax was really a bad team last year. The Wild took advantage of that and racked up some points against them. So we'll have to see if they can keep that going, even though by all appearances, it looks like the Tides are improved from last year.
Yeah, they lost their last two games and drew the game before that, but they did kick their season off with a win. So they're above Calgary, who are still searching for their first win. But coming into this one after their most promising performance and results of 2026, that being their 2-2 draw, thanks to some late Maya Jones heroics. last weekend against the Montreal Roses.
Yeah, it was great to get Maya Jones back from injury, but I think we have an injury update that was released by the NSL today. I actually really like this. It's on their website. In that injury report, a pretty key cog to the Wild lineup is appears to be out of action this weekend.
Yeah, that being Captain Maggie Doherty-Howard. She starts every game, right, in central midfield. So that's going to be a really big loss. And I'm curious to see who they slot in to replace her, or if they change their formation or strategy or tactics at all to accommodate her absence. I also noticed, Jason, and you bolded it here, is that Sarita Thurton, who hasn't played yet this season, is removed from the injury list. So we may see her first minutes of 2026.
Yeah, I believe last week she was quote unquote in doubt, but yeah, she's not on the list. So that would lead me to think she's somewhat likely to dress at least. So getting her back in the lineup, now with Maya Jones and everything, is going to definitely add to their attack. So from that perspective, that's promising.
Yeah. A discussion prompt for you, Jason, but do you think Maya Jones will start this week?
No, I don't think she can do 90 minutes yet. And I'm not basing that on anything that I know or I've heard or I've seen, but I just don't think you could be away with an injury for that long. And after playing 15 minutes as a substitute the next week, just go out and do 90. I kind of expect and hope that she'll get more than 15 minutes in the next match. But I think starting probably not, because realistically speaking, maybe you could think about getting a half from her. But if I had to get a half from her, I'd rather get the second half, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would too. And I'm not disagreeing with you at all. The only reason I did kind of think about that is looking at this injury list, noticing that Janaea Robertson is in the in doubt category, and that made me wonder if maybe Maya will play instead of her in the starting 11. But no, I'm of the same mind that I think she'll play more than 15 minutes, but it will likely be in the second half, not the first.
Seems unlikely Sarita Thurton would be ready to start. So we'll probably see Jorian Baucom, probably one of the Stewarts for sure. And then maybe last week we saw both Stewarts start, but maybe it could be Kylie Johnson instead. So we'll see, I guess. It's always fun to kind of speculate with the lineup a bit, but it won't be the same lineup as last week. We know that.
So I guess now's a good time, Jason, to slot in our interview for this episode. As mentioned, we chatted with the Wild's new co-owner, Alyssa Mitchell. So let's run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Alyssa Mitchell to the podcast. Alyssa is the newly named majority co-owner of the Calgary Wild. She is a Michigan-based entrepreneur who is the founder of a clothing brand called DAM, or DDAM. Alyssa, thank you for coming on our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very excited to be here.
For sure. And to start off, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about you? Obviously, I tried to introduce you there, but feel free to fill in any gap. We know you're from Michigan, for instance, but can you talk about your background and how you came to be involved with co-owning a professional women's soccer team in Canada?
Yes, of course. So I grew up in Michigan and I went to the University of Tennessee for college, where I studied business management. And from a very young age, I was always in love with fashion. And my job out of college was working for a clothing brand in Los Angeles called Baja East. And then during COVID, things obviously took a turn, and I saw it as an opportunity to really kind of take my vision and bring it to life. So I started my own clothing brand called DAM, which is actually named after all of my brothers, Dylan, Dex, and Admin Maddox. And I've been doing that for the past 6 years, which has been really amazing. I grew up very fortunate. So my family has a family office, which is, similar to venture capital, but a little bit different because you're investing your own money instead of someone else's. So, at a very young age, I saw just entrepreneurship, and our family office has tons of different investments, anywhere from, my clothing brand to healthcare. And then my dad actually, kind of introduced us all to women's soccer. So I'm not sure if you guys know or not, but he owns AFC Toronto. So, I had a front row seat to the women's soccer league starting last year, from the very beginning, and immediately I became attracted to the sport. I didn't grow up playing many sports. I actually rode horses. So, it's fun to see, how this league is really, growing into something beautiful. And a lot of my friends growing up actually played soccer. So it was just an immediate love for the sport. And I think what, the league is building is just great. And I think there's a ton of opportunity. So that's kind of, how I got started with soccer. And, as we all know, I think there's a ton of potential in the league. And Calgary was looking for a majority investor. So I just thought, why not? I think family competition is always fun. So, I grew up supporting my family and they support me, but, we're going to support each other until match day. So,
What about, say, the Wild in particular was specifically appealing that, there could have been other investments potentially, but why the Calgary Wild?
so again, I would say it started really with my dad's investment in AFC. And I was actually on the board for AFC for the first year. So I got to see a lot of the ins and outs. And, having just open discussions with my dad, he kind of presented the opportunity because he's on the board of the NSL as well. And I just think that, in Calgary, it's the first women's professional team, which I think is incredible. And, seeing myself as being a brand builder and what it's like to start from the ground up, it was just very exciting. And I think what Calgary has is amazing, and what they're building. And I think there's just, again, like endless opportunities within the community as well as for myself, owning a clothing brand, looking at it from like a merchandise aspect. So, how can I support the team in that category as well? And, how can they support my business? So, yeah, that's kind of where that all came from.
What kind of role do you see for yourself in this position, Alyssa? I mean, obviously, an owner or like an investor is very much in the background, not exactly front and center when it comes to decisions and things like that. But what do you kind of think of your involvement with the Wild will be as a majority investor?
Yeah, so again, I have a lot of enthusiasm about the Wild. And as I mentioned, I don't really have a sporting background, but that's why we have, obviously a strong team in place to support those matters. And as, I continue on this journey, I'm sure there's going to be a point where I get more involved in the sporting matters. But, I would say I'm really excited to be a part of, like, the marketing, again, helping with merchandise. How can we improve our margins with the merchandise? And how can we get the community involved? I think there's so much, again, opportunity and so much parts of it that are untapped. So how can we, bring the local community and just different areas of people in to see a game? And once we get them in for that first game, I'm confident that they're gonna keep wanting to come back. So, right now I'm planned, to be pretty involved, and I think, it'll just help the team with, showing stability. I think for the players, it's exciting having a majority female owner, and, the minority owners are primarily women as well for this team. So I think just showing a strong women's presence is very exciting. So I definitely want to be as involved as possible, but at the moment, I'm going to stay away from the sports side.
Wanted to ask about Calgary. Like, do you have any previous connections to Calgary? Like, did you come into town to check things out, meet people, or what's your background and relationship with Calgary?
I really don't have a relationship specifically with Calgary, but my grandfather actually grew up in Winnipeg. So we do have family ties to Canada, as well as, being from Detroit. We are very close to the border. So there is a heritage aspect to this, but in terms of Calgary specifically, I have not had the opportunity to go yet, but I'm very much looking forward to going to visit everyone and meet everyone in person. I've had lots of conversations over the phone and on Zoom. with all of the leadership. But I'm very excited to, be there in person and meet the team and watch a game.
Obviously, the Wild's game against AFC Toronto is coming up, I think, in just 11 days from now. So, I mean, will that one have a little bit of added poignancy for you? Obviously, that'll be like a father-daughter rivalry game in some ways.
Yeah, a huge match, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend this match because I actually have my bachelorette next weekend, but we will be virtually there. And I really hope we can bring a win, and I'm very confident in our girls that we can, but it's definitely going to be a big rivalry in the house.
Yeah, that's the one team I think Calgary still has to get a positive result against. AFC Toronto, very strong last year with a couple of Calgarians on the team.
One question we want to maybe ask about, and I know that you said about not really having the involvement on the sporting side, but I think one question that is sort of a big picture kind of question about the team and the future of the team is a stadium. So like the current stadium is getting old and it's not a great fit. It's owned by the University of Calgary. They're talking about maybe trying to build something new. Like that's a big thing, right? So that's a big investment, a big project. Is that part of the equation here? Like something you're thinking about, something you considered in the
I
investment?
Yeah, I definitely think it's important, and it's, again, like I said earlier, this is a very long-term play, and I think that it's a huge opportunity. Obviously that requires a lot of investment. However, I think, down the road it would be a great thing to do. And I think from a fan standpoint, I obviously have not been to a specific game yet at Calgary, but I think it's very important for the fans, as well as the players to have, it just has to be a good vibe. When you go, we have Little Caesars Arena here for hockey and basketball, but it was built a few years ago. And when you go, it's great energy. It's easy to navigate. And I think that's important that, we get a great stadium down the line. So it's definitely something I'm thinking about. Again, I think there's a lot that we have to iron out first. But it's definitely on my mind.
We did want to kind of give you an opportunity to have the last word in this interview. So any like message to the Wild supporters or fan base before we end this interview?
Yes. I would just say that, I'm very excited and I'm glad that I'm here and I can't wait to meet everybody. And just thank you for supporting Calgary. Thank you for supporting women's sports. And, I'm very excited for us to bring some wins this season. So go Calgary.
Thanks again, Alyssa. We appreciate the conversation today.
Of course. Thank you guys so much.
Anything in particular catch your attention?
You made a good note kind of when we weren't recording. I think that this is probably a pretty unique relationship when you have a father and daughter owning two separate teams in the same league. I know you did some sleuthing to try and see if there was a similar scenario anywhere or a precedent, and you weren't able to find that. So that is pretty interesting. And another thing that sticks out is that the Mitchell family, now owns a third of the teams in the NSL, or are majority owners for a third of the teams in the league. That's also pretty rare, I would assume.
Getting back to what you talked about, my research there, I actually did a little bit more research after I talked to you, and I cannot find any example of a situation where two pro teams were playing in the same league and had direct family members oppose, like where one sibling owns one team and the other sibling owns another team and they play each other in the league, or a parent and a child. I couldn't find it. As far as I can see it, it's unprecedented to that level. So it is definitely a unique situation.
Yeah, and another thing I know you and I wanted to talk about was the question about the stadium. Obviously, McMahon has been talked about a little bit more. Sorry, McWoman Stadium has been talked about a little bit more this year, considering, I think, the Calgary Stampede's master plan, which has proposed a kind of pie in the sky idea to convert GMC Stadium into a new home for the Stampeders, which would, remove the McWoman Stadium's main tenant. But yeah, obviously that if McMahon does go the way of the dodo bird at some point in the not so distant future, that also means the Wilds will need to find a new home. So it is something that I think they have to start thinking about sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and Scott, I love talking about all that stadium stuff, and when we're a little bit light on matches during World Cup, I have a feeling we're going to be devoting some time to going into that in a bit more detail. But I agree, there's McMahon Stadium it's approaching its end use date. I don't think it's going to happen anytime immediately, but you can see it. Like, you can see the end of the tunnel now, I think.
Yeah, and the University of Calgary, which owns the stadium, has come out and said that directly, that they need to start thinking about a post McMahon Stadium future, which is why the university is launching its own, or rather in collaboration with an alumni group, is trying to get a stadium built on campus that would be much smaller but more appropriate for the likes of the Dinos football and soccer teams. And if they do build a 5,000 to 7,000 seat stadium, that would probably be the perfect size for the Calgary Wild. But we have to wait and see if that comes to fruition. Depends on fundraising and many other factors. But yeah, I mean, stadiums and home fields have always been kind of a major topic when it comes to Calgary's professional soccer teams in the past. So something to keep an eye on for sure.
I am Christian Greco-Taylor, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So just a few hours before the Wilds kick off against Halifax, Cavalry will be playing at home as well against a team from the opposite coast, that being Pacific, for the third time this year, Jason. It seems like Pacific are becoming regular opponents of Cavalry. And this will be just 15 days after Cavalry knocked Pacific out of the Canadian Championship.
I hate these matches, Scott, where the coach gets fired, and it's the first game after the coach gets fired. I always hate these games because it is the time where somehow a team can somehow pull a performance out of a hat, It seems.
Oh, how did I leave that out? Yeah, of course. We just found out today that James Merriman has departed ways with Pacific FC. So yeah, their I think longtime assistant coach is taking the reins temporarily. Can't think of his name right now, but James Merriman has been head coach of Pacific since like Pa Modou Ka left, right? So that's quite the change. But honestly, it's been a long time coming if you look at the way that team has been playing for the last few years.
Well, I think this year they've just been terrible. I don't think I know enough about all the seasons of all the teams over the years. Valor had some really bad seasons, but this Pacific team, they just seem to have nothing. Like they don't seem to have any spark, any life. They don't seem to have much they haven't really recruited very aggressively. They've got a couple interesting players, a couple players that we like, James Greco-Taylor, Ronan Kratt, like there's others too, but I would say that in the talent department in general, they're probably lacking as well. So
they've played 6 games in the league. They're still looking for their first win. They have 1 draw and 5 losses. They have the second lowest goals for in the CPL with 6 goals, so 1 a game. But they have the worst defensive record with 12 goals against, so -6 goal differential. And 1 point from 6 games. And as mentioned, they were knocked out by Cavalry in the opening round of the Can Champ not that long ago. So a team that is, every time I watch them play, they just look demoralized. And I feel like we're repeating ourselves because I feel like we had this exact same discussion last year when they were similarly down in the dumps at the bottom of the standings.
Yep. Well, that'll be on Sunday. I am very much looking forward to it. It's going to be my first visit to Spruce Meadows this season. And if I do it right, I'm hoping to still make it to at least part of the Wild match as well. So we'll see if I can make that happen or not. I'm gonna try, but I'm looking forward to it.
So as poor as Pacific's start to the 2026 season has been, it's really been the opposite for Cavalry. They're still unbeaten after 6 games, 4 wins and 2 draws, 9 goals for and only 3 goals against. So while they're not at the top of the table, that position is still held by Forge, who have 5 wins and 1 draw. Cavalry are pretty happy these days, Jason, and in the social media stuff that I see from them, they seem to be in pretty good spirits.
You don't want to say that like everything is perfect, but everything is about as stress-free and drama-free and going well as I think a pro team could be, like, 6 weeks into the season. I don't know how it could be much better than this. I guess perfect record, but really, like, everything is going about it as well as I think it can go. Even from an injury standpoint, really, there's not much going on there right now even. So they haven't been decimated with injuries. I think we were a bit concerned that Harry Payton might be out for a while, but he didn't take him very long to get back.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched, I think, all but one Cavalry game this season. And while I feel like a couple of the results flatter them, like obviously they won that game against Montreal with a late penalty. But overall, like they've managed to find a way to win games and get results, right? And that's the most important thing. Like nobody's going to remember how the game actually went, months from now. But I find that even in games where they maybe are getting outplayed a little bit, like they're still producing. So I think fans are really happy, and that you can tell, like you said, like it just seems like a stress-free environment at Spruce Meadows these days. What I think is interesting is that, like, from the games I've seen, they don't look like the strongest Cavalry side we've seen. I think some of the spells they had last year and in 2024, like that team was clicking more than this team is. But considering they did replace a lot of pieces, that just, makes the standings and the results more impressive. But I would say, like, I don't think this has been the best Cavalry team in the club's 8-year history.
Yeah, that's fair. One thing I would say, though, is I actually think this team, even though they've had all these good results, I don't think that they've reached their full potential. Like, you really look at their offense. Like, Moosey has not had the best year. This offense could attain higher heights than it currently is. Like, it's doing just fine. But remember last year, there were moments where they just looked offensively, that front four just looked unstoppable. And I think that we could have spells like that again. So there's definitely a possibility where, in some aspects of their game, I think they still have another gear.
Yeah, I think they could reach another gear, but I'm just trying to find something to talk about other than just how good things are going, because I don't want to just do that. But yeah, I agree that, like, in terms of, this team has in the past almost always started seasons slow, and we all know about how they went through Aprils without getting wins, and so overall, like, can't really complain that much with how things are going over at Spruce Meadows.
Hi, this is Naima Ingleton, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Time to talk about the Alberta Premier League. There was a full slate of matches on Tuesday evening. We've got a bunch of reviews to talk about. Where do you want to start?
Well, how about we start with the game that you were at? Because you've been to a couple of games up at Slate involving Cavalry too, and they were hosting Calgary Blizzard this week. So how did that game go?
Well, Blizzard won 2-0, and they had goals from Jacob Hunter and William Omaruni. And good game. It was cold. It was windy. It was not the most pleasant. I was a bit underdressed. I was there for the second half. Blizzard, man, they look like a good team. I'd like to see them play Pacific.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it?
They just look so mature, composed, obvious. They play together all the time. Like, they looked really, really good. I was very impressed with that team. The full marks for the 2-0 win. And from a Cavalry point of view, as we kind of suspected, a few of the senior players got into this match, including Joe Holiday. He played 90, and Michael Harm started, Curtis Safori started. So we got a chance to see those players. Although it appears that in that match, Michael Harms must have sustained some kind of knock, because when I got there at halftime, he was sitting outside of the field, and he had a pair of crutches beside him, and he was kind of holding his legs. So it wasn't like he was being rushed to the hospital or anything, but clearly something must have happened earlier in the match. But so hopefully that's nothing significant.
I wanted to see how the standings look, because I haven't actually looked at the APL standings in a while, and it's still pretty early days. Hey, like, some teams have only played 2 games, while Cavalry 2 has now played 4. They have, a 2-2 record. But yeah, I think, looking at Blizzard have started off strong with 2 wins from 2 games, as have Calgary Foothills. So they're both up near the top of the table, along with Edmonton BTB, who are rocking a perfect 3-0 record so far. So other games on the men's division from Tuesday, noticed that Foothills beat Rangers 4-1 over at Macron. Chinan Chanda scored a brace. Fraser Aird with his second penalty kick goal of the season, and the fourth goal was from Emmanuel Dan Adokiani, Cavalry draft pick, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And then Rangers' goal scored by Fraser Aird. It was an own goal.
Yeah. And getting back to Emmanuel Danakinade, it was announced, I think, today that he is transferring. He is leaving Trinity Western, and he is going to a school, honestly, I've never heard of before, Rider University.
Yeah, in New Jersey, but they are a Div 1 school that do apparently win their conference somewhat regularly, we managed to determine.
I checked, and they were in the NCAA tournament. Vermont knocked them out. I don't think that was the year that Vermont won at all. I think it was in 2023. But yeah, they're in the conference they're in, which is a relatively small conference. They win it regularly. They are, relatively speaking, like a pretty good team, pretty good side. But didn't know much about Rider University until today, actually.
And in other games from Tuesday, Callies played Villains at Broadview. 3-1 win for Villains, which is their first win in league history. They have a 1-18 record now. Their goals came from Shadrach Boaki, Lucas Coleman. That's it. Shadrach Boaki scored twice.
Yeah, and Lucas Coleman on Villains Instagram said he's on his way to Austria to go on trial. Doesn't say what club, though.
Interesting. But yeah, that's a big result for Villains. We know that they've had some bruising losses in the APL, so quite promising to see them put one in the win column for once.
Absolutely.
And in the women's division, we also saw a slate of games on Tuesday night. Maxwell Center, Calgary Soccer Center, Wild U23s were taking on Blizzard. Blizzard won this one 2-1.
Yeah, goals by McKenna Walker, Brooke Batty, and for Wild U23, it was Maya Emberley. Scores again, 3 goals in 3 matches.
Yeah, and then we also saw Foothills take on Rangers. I believe this was also at Macron, and this was a 2-1 win for Foothills with 2 goals from Emma Nicholson.
And Rangers' goal was from Aileen Ryu.
And then finally, at Broadview, Villains beat Callies 3-0 with goals coming from Danielle Lehman and Margaret Cumming. Danielle Lehman scored a brace.
So just like we looked at the men's table, let's take a quick look at the women's table. Wild U23 is actually at the top of the table with 6 points on 3 games.
Yeah, I don't know if we've seen them top the table before, Jason.
Well, last year
they were exhibition games, so I guess that's why.
But this team is much stronger than what they had last year. This match on Tuesday, Sarah Kelty Dilling played again in goal. They didn't have any other senior players playing, but they seem like they've got really strong lineups. Although they are in first place with 6 points. St. Albert and Blizzard have 4 points, and they have a game in hand. Those teams are both still undefeated with a win and a draw. So they're also right up there when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, and there's actually 4 teams that are on 4 points at the moment. Rangers and BTB also with 1 win and a draw. However, they have both played 3 games and have a loss each. So they both have 1-1-1 records.
Yeah, and Foothills, Villains have 3 points each, and Calways is bringing up the rear. They have no points in 2 matches so far.
So as usual in the APL, their games are going to be held on Friday evening. However, it doesn't look like any games are going to be taking place in Calgary.
This seems like a weird anomaly because this is a league where 6 of the 8 teams are in Calgary. So what are the chances that there would be a night where there are matches being played, but like more than 1 match being played, there being no games in Calgary at all? So it seems like a weird, quirky schedule thing, but yeah, whatever, I guess.
Yeah, and we will see St. Albert Impact take on Villains. Men kick off at 5:30, the women at 7:45. BTB will host the Wild U23 in the women's division at 5:30 p.m. And then on the men's side, BTB will take on Cavalry 2 at 7:40.
This is Canadian FIFA assistant referee Mike Barbigan, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So it seems like, Scott, your day job has intersected in the podcast soccer world yet again. It doesn't happen that often, but it's happened a couple times in rather quick succession.
It feels that way, doesn't it? Yeah, I found myself assigned today to do a story about the worsening state of Calgary's grass soccer fields, specifically the ones that are managed and owned by the City of Calgary. So this all kind of started with the executive director for CUSA posting about it on social media, saying that they have received a lot more complaints than usual from players and coaches about the state of the fields that they are playing their games on. Things like potholes and divots and floodlights, not working and grass being uncut, all kinds of issues. So she just wanted to bring this to light. And her name is Stacey Hatcher, the exec for CUSA. So interviewed her and then also got a reply from the city kind of explaining why the fields are in bad condition this year, which is due to a variety of factors.
I think it's maybe something from my own perspective that I just don't spend a lot of time thinking about. I just kind of you just kind of assume that there's sort of a baseline level of care being taken. But this whole idea that players could be getting injured because of the field, like you'd like to think, if nothing else, the fields may not be beautiful necessarily, but they should be safe.
Yeah. And, I haven't played men's league since 2023, so I can't really speak to what it's like right now. But based on the canvassing I did of friends who coach, they say, yeah, it's never been this bad. As mentioned, there's a couple of reasons why the field conditions are deteriorating. One is simply the spring that we've had, right? Calgary has had a very stop-start spring this year with repeat snowfalls and then frost, and then it melts, and then they play games, and then it snows again, and then it melts again. So that has kind of wreaked havoc on the field. But what the city told me is that they've also never had this much demand for their fields. Like they're constantly in use, and there's just not enough time for the turf to recover before they have to host another game. So there's a little bit of overuse syndrome going on, and that is indicative of, I guess, a shortage of fields and the fact that so many soccer has grown so much in terms of player registrations. As we've talked about with the lack of indoor spaces, an outdoor, that's not so much an issue, except that a lot of the field inventory is natural grass, and that does get torn up over and over again.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there to buy Scott's book. It's called Here Come the Cavalry, and it's all about history of pro soccer in Calgary. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as X and Instagram and Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.